This week's module will be focused on the beginning stages of a group. As you work with your partner team to develop a group proposal and to facilitate those sessions within class, these first steps, this first stage of beginning a group is particularly important. As groups come together around a common purpose or shared goals, they get to the understanding of the expectations and that clarity of purpose through a skilled group leader. Group leaders, these first stages, this beginning a group, takes intentionality and thought and planning on the part of the group leader. We're going to go through the information about this process today. Groups progress through process and stages of development. Functional groups, as they progress through these developmental stages, move towards cohesion and ultimately transformation. There are many different theorists out there who have described the different stages of groups, and they characterize them anywhere from 3 steps to 6 steps, right? Most fall along the span of 4 to 5 steps in group development, and what we will be using will be a 5-step process as well. Or what we'll be talking about primarily will be a 5-step process as well. But I encourage you to look at Yalom's stages, these 3 first. Orientation, conflict, cohesiveness. That cohesiveness piece, that's key for groups. And it takes a skilled leader to be able to encourage a group to develop a measure of cohesiveness together, to get to a point of cohesion where the team is impacting each other and interdependent, and there's recognition of that interdependence, but they're able to deal with the challenges that the group encounters. The steps, the other developmental steps we'll be talking about, follow along primarily these stages: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. We've also got awareness, conflict, cooperation, productivity, and separation. As you look down all of these, I won't read them all to you, but as you look down all of these, you'll see that initially we come together with some forming or orientation to the purpose and process of a group. Like, why are we here? What are we trying to do together? There's just a clear step for that. And it takes intentionality on the part of the leader to work the group through that step, right? That's the step we're talking about today. But then we move into storming or conflict, or cohesiveness, transitioning, conflict. You can see all of these things. They all end up being pretty much the same. When we move into that stage, what we're seeing is that the group's figuring out how to work together. Because you have a set of individuals, all with different personalities, different expectations initially. They've got their expectations for the group, but they may have some different expectations for themselves, different anxieties. We're going to talk about some of the stresses that you might encounter in this first stage, but everybody brings that. Like, each member brings some of that. And so that second stage, that storming, conflict, acceptance, whatever the team happens to call it, the theorists happen to call it, that's a time of difficulty for a group. We're going to talk about that more later in the semester. Then norming, cooperation, working action. This norming and performing, sometimes those two are kind of linked together. That's when we have come to a measure of understanding of how we're going to work together, and we're engaged in that work. And then we have termination, separation, closing, right? We'll get to all of these stages, but today our stage is focused on that forming and orientation. That's the stage that we're focused on today. In this class, over the course of the time of the class, we will primarily refer to the following stages: forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning, like we mentioned before. Okay, the focus of the developmental process for groups move through this developmental process because the group is working towards becoming an interdependent team. It's a team of individuals. And they're working towards organizing themselves in a way that allows them to work together to reach shared or mutual goals. There's a reason that there's a developmental process, that we don't go into the power of the group lies within the dynamics and the processing. And that happens because over time of this developmental process, we connect with each other and we become a cohesive group, an interdependent team with responsibility to each other and connections to each other. The stage we're focused on today, the forming stage for us, orientation. This is the first stage in the developmental process. It's multidimensional because at this time you have individuals with little or no connection to each other or awareness of each other at this point, probably no pre-existing relationships, coming together to form an interdependent team. And it's multidimensional because they bring individual anxieties, individual strengths. You have relationships among individuals developing, relationships within as a group, the actual group relationship developing. And within all of that, there's an inherent risk for participants. Most people are a little nervous. Some people are really nervous, and there's a lot of anxiety when they come to join a group. It's really important, highly important, that as a group facilitator, a group counselor, that you attend to critical steps in the formation component of group development. If you don't attend to those steps, then your group will go into the next stage, which is a difficult stage, challenging stage, to go into that with an incomplete foundation. So it's really, really critical that you attend to these steps in the formation component. Like I mentioned before, it can feel very high risk to participants and anxiety provoking, and it begins even before the first physical meeting. The steps in the forming stage. Before you even meet group members or potential group members, as a group counselor, group facilitator, you must develop a rationale. You've got an idea. The group begins, conceptually, as it mentions in the book, with the generation of ideas. You've got a rationale for the reason that this group needs to exist, and a plan for what it is you hope to accomplish with that group. If you as a leader are unclear about your purpose, if you're trying to run a group because it seems to fit in the right time slot, or if you're in an internship, you've got to do a group and you're just trying to figure out how to make it happen. If you are unsure of why you're running the group, it's highly likely that the group will not result in successful outcomes for the clients or participants. It's very important that you go into this with intentionality and a clear understanding of why your group matters, why you think this group matters, why it's important, why do you want to do it, right? From there, you shift into step 2, where you're deciding on your theoretical format. At this point, what is the theoretical format you're operating from for this group? It's important that your process in the group, your plans for the group, the procedures that you use are informed by clear theory. Even if you have an eclectic approach, it's important that you articulate why the different components fit within that eclectic approach. Your theoretical format should function, the function of that should focus on interpersonal, and extrapersonal matters, but all in varying degrees. And the theory that you're choosing to use, the theoretical base that you're choosing to use, should really line up with the needs of your potential participants. Okay. When you think about the I, the we, it levels of functioning in the group, the I is the individual, the intrapersonal focus on beliefs, feelings, and attitudes, right? Like, what does the individual bring to this? The we, that's the interpersonal dimension. The group concerns, right? Like the group as it exists in itself. And then for you, as you think about the it, that's the extrapersonal emphasis on issues, tasks, or groups' concerns. So as you wish to facilitate different development, interpersonal development, like the we development of members, you're focusing on cohesion there. You're going to do different tasks, and you're going to rely on different components of theory than when you're focused on the I or the it. Okay? Group work is very challenging because it's complex, it's dynamic. There's a lot of individual personalities, and their interactions together impact how the group progresses through. Along with those more ambiguous components, but the critically important professional components like the theoretical format, you've got some really practical considerations. Those practical considerations, the time, your concrete, like specific concrete practical objectives and procedures, time, your place, your frequency, all of these pieces have to be nailed down. What do you hope to do? What can you actually do? How does it fit? And how is it going to result in the impacts that you hope to achieve? It's very critical that you consider the practical considerations and how those pieces fit for your setting, your group intentions, focus, and your potential participants. Then how do you publicize your group? How do you let people know you're going to be running a group? How you do that, how you publicize it will impact the types of participants that you engage and how comfortable people are approaching you about joining your group. The best practice guidelines that are published by ASGW that's a document that gives you some really clear preparation procedures information. Within that, you'll find some publication information, and it will be useful for you as you prepare your group proposal and the sessions that you plan to deliver in class. You go back to those best practice guidelines and you look at what they say about specific issues, regarding content, preparation procedures, and the like. Okay. Then, once you're ready to interact with potential group members, you shift into step 5, which is screening and pre-training. Potential group members must be screened. It's really critical that you screen potential group members. You say, what is the suitability of this individual for the group that I'm composing? And carefully choose those group members, because the impact that they have on each other, that interdependence, that'll impact whether or not the group can be successful. Most experts in group procedures endorse either an individually conducted pre-group screening procedure or either a group conducted pre-group screening process. You can use whichever format works best for you, and different groups, different types of groups are going to require different levels or intensity of screening and pre-training initially, but it's something you should give time and attention to in your planning. You know, which of these approaches seems to be the best fit for my group, and how can I do it realistically in my setting? Pre-group, if you're considering doing a pre-group screening interview, which you should be considering doing a pre-group screening interview, but as you think about that, some of the steps that you should be considering include identifying needs, expectations, and commitment. These factors, commitment is probably considered to be the most crucial. How necessary is it that the individuals be there at every session? How do you make it clear to them that this commitment matters? And how do you try to estimate what the individual hopes to get out of the group? You should also challenge any myths and misconceptions during that pre-group screening, and at that point also it's necessary to convey information, basic information about the group process and expectations, including confidentiality and stages, roles as you feel it's appropriate. Pre-training involves the process of orienting group members on what to expect from the group. Before you ever meet, what are the basic expectations for the group? You're going to share as much of that as seems appropriate, and you're going to also attend to the fact that during your initial forming stage, you're going to do training, you're going to cover expectations and basic procedures and develop a shared understanding as well. Then shift into the fun part, the selecting your group members. Who seems to be the right, who seems to fit into the composition of the group in a way that they'll positively impact each other and they'll get positive impact from the others. So this selection of group members is usually a two-way process. You have your audience that you're interviewing, potential participants that you're selecting, and then the leader, the potential members, they decide whether or not they want to join, right? So that's kind of a two-way process. If you have individuals who really do not appear likely to contribute to the growth of the group, or if they don't have if they're not at the right developmental level or maturity level for what will be shared in the group, it may be best that those people be excluded from this group, and you might find another group that's a better fit. And sometimes you'll find that you've composed a group of people that really don't seem to relate well to each other, and there's a lot of interpersonal conflict. That doesn't result in the best group. So over time, you'll get a sense of how to identify potential group members and the flashpoints that seem to be the things that you key in on that make a good group member, the right group member for a certain group, or the appropriate group member for a certain group. Just because the potential client doesn't seem to be the right fit for this group, they may be a fit for another group. And then you select your leader. For you, you're the leader, right? But if you have a group leader who's going to be someone, if you're in a situation where you have multiple potential leaders, and some of those potential leaders don't seem to have the qualities necessary to be really effective as a group leader, then it's better to make that call. Information about the group leader's style in sessions, that's important to know, and it's good that a person be able to utilize their own style and what works for you in session, and that their style is a good fit for the group that's been composed as well. In this stage, in the forming stage, as you're beginning a group, there's some developmental tasks you're going to encounter. First is dealing with apprehension. Many potential clients are very concerned about how the group's going to be, the impact of the group, what they'll do in the group, how they'll be perceived by the group. There's a lot of anxiety around this process for potential members. Dealing with apprehension during that forming stage, or with members during that forming stage, is critical. It's important that you allow group participants to delve into their apprehension and to talk with you about their concerns so that you can address those concerns initially, and then as a group normalize that experience for them. Yes, there is apprehension. We have apprehension when we come to this process. It's perfectly normal, and we can work through that together. Some of these basic components that follow help to alleviate some of that apprehension. When you're reviewing goals and establishing contracts and rules, setting limits and boundaries, these things make people more comfortable because they understand the parameters and what's expected of them. Then as you build cohesion over time, that apprehension will continue to lessen. It's very critical that you have specific objectives or goals that you have set for the group, and that those goals are communicated with the group members, or to the group members. And I say with because many times we have objectives for the group, but then as we get together, every member brings their own expectations and hopes for the experience. So to the extent possible, when you can incorporate those together and develop goals that are take the goals that you had for the group and allow those goals to evolve to encompass the hopes and wishes of the group members, then we have a lot more shared investment in the goals, and we're much more willing to work towards them. So we review those goals, and with the review of goals, through that process we establish contracts. So what are the expectations? What is the contract? A contract is an agreement of what will be done and when. And so basically it's transactional in nature. This is what we've set as the expectations. We have formulated and verbalized our goals. These are the expectations, and this is what it takes for group members to achieve those expectations together. And we agree to do it, that we are invested in the process. The contract lays out that investment. When you're specifying group rules, these are the guidelines by which we're running the group. They're established both before and during the group process. In pre-group screening sessions, you will take the time at that point to share some information about rules, right? Basic rules, no physical violence, no drugs, you have to attend all meetings, whatever the basic rules are, right? You're trying to state the rules in the most positive way possible, right? So instead of saying no physical violence, as they said in your text, an example in your text, instead of saying no physical violence, you may say members will respect the physical and psychological space of others at all times. Try to be positive with the focus. It's not a focus on exclusion, it's a focus on creating a space where people can be comfortable sharing and interacting together, right? As you go through the sessions, everybody's going to be making contributions to the process, right? And those contributions set some parameters by which the group is going to provide. So if we find that there's certain things the group needs, then those things we incorporate into our rules in a fashion that is respected, approved, and engaged in by all group members. One rule that is must be agreed to, it's important that it be agreed to, but it's actually very, very difficult to enforce, is confidentiality. So that explicit agreement, that whatever we're saying in this group, this stays in group. This is what we consider the ethical cornerstone of group counseling and psychotherapy. It's really valued, highly valued, and a critical component of the process. But sometimes when you're dealing with the group, confidentiality is violated. It's intentional, sometimes it's unintentional. What we want to do is review the process of confidentiality, the expectations for confidentiality early on, and touch back on those expectations throughout the time as a group, as the group moves over time. Come back to those expectations. The group leader, the group counselors, you have expectations for confidentiality that are absolutely critical, how you manage records, materials, information about members of the group, and you must absolutely attend to those. As you go along, when breaches of confidentiality do occur and people are upset, not on the part of the group leader, but by group members breach confidentiality, that disrupts the function of the group, and it promotes distrust among the members. It breaks down the framework of trust. And so it's really, really important that when we talk about the group rules, we focus on confidentiality and we do everything we can along the way to build the group's investment in that cornerstone of our ethical conduct as group members. Another piece of a developmental task is setting limits and boundaries. Limits, gliding in your text purports that limits are the outer boundaries of a group in regard to behaviors that will be accepted within the group. Some are explicit, some are implicit. The rules help to outline acceptable behaviors and procedures and particularly around like time, when you think about time. But implicit rules are more subtle. They may involve such actions as attention of the leader to a particular member, or the verbal reinforcement or discouragement of certain content topics. But we need to be as clear as possible about limits and boundaries, and anytime that from at the beginning, in the beginning stage and forming stage, have a good discussion of these pieces. And then anytime they seem to be more murky, just open the conversation. Conversation allows the opportunity for group members to weigh in and to come to some shared understandings. And that is shared understandings and personal investment and engagement. Those are the pieces that make it possible to maintain rules and limits and boundaries. Then as a group counselor, a group leader, promoting a positive interchange among the members, that is a very, very critical step, critical component, critical developmental task for the forming stage. It's important that you work to promote these positive dynamics and help them begin to build some connections with each other. One way of promoting these is interactive journal writing. This sort of process, the members keep logs of their thoughts or feelings or impressions, behaviors within a group, and they exchange them in all directions. Members to leaders, members to members, leader to members. The exchange goes all the way around. And this helps because it allows some of that shared understanding and personal investment. Some potential group problems you may encounter during the forming stage. Really involve this stage. The potential problems really break down into problems with individuals, like people problems, and structure problems or procedural problems. Okay. Now with those, you really want to be very careful to avoid labeling or stereotyping group members. But you must attend to the style, I shouldn't say but, I should say and, maybe attend to the style and behavioral challenges. Like you have to look at potential dynamic difficulties or difficulties within dynamics. What are some difficult, challenging personal behaviors? Are there subgroups that are forming that they're rendering an imbalance of power within the group? Are you so immersed as a group leader in the content that you can't really focus on the interactional patterns? You're not seeing the transactions and the interactions that are impacting the flow of the group, the cohesiveness of the group. And then you've got group procedural problems. There are a number of group procedural problems you can encounter. As your text covers particular types of styles of individuals that may come to the group: manipulators, resistors, monopolizers, silent members. I would encourage you to look at those, kind of think about style and what it means and how those different styles might impact the group, and how you as a group leader might work to take the strengths of a style and bring those strengths into the group process while taking the challenges of the style and muting those challenges. We're going to talk about that in class. We're going to work together on some of this in class, but it takes a measure of skill to be able to understand style and dynamics and not take that understanding and apply it in a way that stereotypes and limits your group members. Because within these styles, within a manipulator, there is the style of an individual that's more manipulative, and that person's got a lot of power. They get a lot of power, and there can be strength in that process. So, like, if you can reframe those potentially destructive acts that they do, that were manipulative acts, but in ways that encourage the group to come together in a way that positions it as a positive leadership way for that individual, that can be a big help, and it can help the person to recognize, the individuals to recognize the strengths that they have and how the strengths can be used for positive interpersonal relationships, or positive dynamics within interpersonal relationships. But it does take skill on the part of the group leader. Within group procedures, some of the potential challenges you would see would be within opening the group, structure, the involvement, group cohesion, hope, risk-taking. That opening the group, you're going to be nervous too. The group leader is nervous too when you have a new group of people that you haven't interacted with. And sometimes we'll jump directly into the work and we'll miss the opportunity for these really critical components of laying out expectations, goals, plans. Like, you may cover rules, but if you cover rules in a quick way that doesn't build connection and investment, then you're back to like you have to try to enforce rules. You can't. That's not how it works. Like you have to have a group that feels invested in the rules and a part of the rules, and then that group follows it and enforces it as a system, right? So opening the group. The procedures around opening the group, you got to be thoughtful, you got to have a plan, you got to follow your plan, and be willing to, in that process, be comfortable with the ambiguity of not knowing these individuals, your potential clients and group members, but trusting your process and your strengths as a group leader, so that when you come in, you work through the framework you've set for opening the group and you can respond flexibly to the needs of the participants. There's some ideas of options for opening your group in your text, and they're pretty good ideas, so check those out. Within structure, in the initial stage of your group, your forming stage, you've got to think about, you got to make some pretty critical decisions about how you want to structure the group. There's certain groups, task work groups, psycho ed groups. Those groups have pretty clear structure, so you have less worry in that process. But in some of the other groups, counseling groups and psychotherapy groups, it takes you have to decide how much structure are you going to introduce for the group, and how much structure are you going to allow to evolve to meet the needs of the group. The advantages of structuring a group up front is that it can, and clearly, it's like structuring a group early and clearly, is it can promote group cooperation. And it also lessens anxiety, and it can allow you to highlight individual performance. The other thing it does is it allows you to facilitate the inclusion of everyone in the group. It can also give you confidence, help you feel more comfortable going in, and you feel more prepared so that you have less anxiety yourself, and you're better able to make sure you hit the components you want to have included. But if you structure the group, or if you allow the group structure to evolve to meet the needs of the clients, the group is going to get structured. Structure happens. Unstructured groups, though they may promote more initial anxiety and discontent, they can because so much of the structure that emerges lies on the behalf of the members of the group. They can promote really strong group cohesion and morale. So with the understanding that group structure is going to emerge, I guess it's less a question of whether or not you should structure, but more a question of what degree of structure do you want to provide early on in the group at this forming stage. You got to decide what fits best for you. There are some guidelines that have been introduced, or some basic information that's been introduced for structuring the initial stage of group development. And that information may be helpful to you, and it's shared in your chapters, so make sure you read through those components. Another potential challenge for group procedures are around involvement. How involved do you want the group members to be, and the extent to which you want to facilitate member interaction in that first forming stage of the group. Group cohesion is a challenge, and group cohesion, hope, risk-taking, all of these that are listed as challenges on this slide, all of these are challenges and huge strengths for minus opening the group. I mean, that's your foundation, right? But cohesion, hope, risk-taking, those pieces, and engagement on the part of the clients, members, like these pieces are the heart of the group process. So yes, they are challenges, and you have to decide how much are you going to interject of yourself into the process as the leader, and how much do you want to have emerge as a result of the group dynamic and group their connections. But they're all important. And so giving them proper thought up front and being intentional about how the route you choose to take really matters for the group leader. Group procedures that are very useful for advancing your forming stage, allowing this stage to create that strong foundation that we mentioned before: joining, linking, cutting off, drawing out, clarifying the purpose. Now it's kind of interesting to look at these, right? Like joining and linking, but then cutting off. Joining is when you're initially making those connections with individuals. You might have an icebreaker to get to know people. You could have them engage in some activities. You can be more straightforward in a real verbal discussion. But at this point, you are intentionally working to get to know the group members and to help the group members get to know each other. A skilled group counselor or group leader will work to provide linkages across group members as you're making these initial as you're having these initial sharings of oneself, right? So as individual group members, they come to the group as individuals, you start to make those connections with them, you try to work to help them through the structure and process you've outlined, your rules, your expectations and guidelines. You try to help them understand that they are an individual linked to a group, right? But then in that linking, you also try to link individuals to other individuals in the group. It's a very complex process, but it's awesome and it's very powerful. So as a skilled facilitator, what you're working to do are those pieces. Bring your individual self, group member, share it with us. Help us get to know you and join with you. Help me get to know you and join with you. Understand my group, understand our group, these expectations, these rules, these limits and parameters, and then let me connect you with other individuals in this group. So there's strengths in that process, and we're really working up front to build that cohesion. The cutting off is when something's being shared. Sometimes new material will be introduced too late to do anything with it, like they drop a bomb. You cut that off. When it's becoming clear that new information that's too weighty to be shared for the time left is about to be introduced, then you cut the participant off at that time, and you explain that they'll be allowed to share later. This isn't the right time. And there's some phrasing for that in your text. The other form of cutting off is like when a member has been rambling. We're going to talk a lot. These stages are not only important for forming, they're really, really critically important for counselors in their practicum experience and their internship experience. So during those clinical experiences, these are some pieces you're working on, becoming more comfortable with as a counselor. So we're going to focus on it in this class, and you'll focus on it in your clinical experiences classes as well. So if someone's been going too long, cut them off, you come to a stop, and you move to the next piece. But drawing out, how about for the clients, the group members that are not participating? As a skilled member, as you work to draw out clients or group members who are not participating, then you're helping to advance that forming stage, because each individual member is becoming more introduced to the group and a part of the group. And then clarifying your purpose. Sometimes as you go through this forming stage, new information will get presented, or group members present different information about themselves, and the group itself will start to get a little off track. People are working to make their own connections, right? They're engaged beings in this process. So they're trying to make their own connections, and your group's taking an avenue that you didn't intend, and it's not helpful for the group. So at that point, you would work to clarify the purpose so that the forming stage continues along the trajectory of becoming a cohesive group that's going to work together for the focus intended. You're going to do great work with your groups, and that forming stage, attending to your forming stage appropriately, can help you to begin your group with strength and with a foundation that you'll be able to, it'll be a strong foundation from which to build on for all of the coming stages where the dynamic work will happen.